Hey cake chums, and welcome back to another video. Now I'm super excited this week because I have teamed up with a whole host of your favourite caking YouTube creators to celebrate the release of Disney Pixar's new movie, Onward. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to create an airbrushed Onward skyline cake. Gosh, try saying that a few times quickly. Topped to the model of one of the main characters, Ian Lightfoot. And of course, once you finish watching my tutorial today, be sure to check out the rest of the collection, where you can learn how to carve a van cake with the lovely baker, model Ian's staff with Sugar Geek Show, carve an Onward mushroom house from the Little Sherry Cake Company, model a unicorn topper with Lovin' from the Oven, and if she ever gets it finished, learn how to carve a barley Lightfoot cake with Zoe's Fancy Cakes. I must say a massive thank you to Tracy of the Little Cherry Cake Company for inviting me to be part of such an awesome collaboration, and I hope you guys enjoy checking out all of the videos. Anyway, that's enough intro, let's get to the video. So we're starting with a 7-inch white iced cake today, and we're going to be airbrushing it to create the Onward skyline scene. Begin by airbrushing the top, keeping the cake moving as much as possible, and then work your way down the sides. You'll notice that my airbrush is quite spitty, and that means I didn't clean it properly last time, so learn from my mistakes. Switching to pink, I'm going to airbrush up from the bottom, bringing the colours up to meet in the middle. Set that aside to dry slightly, and then using a craft knife, cut out the mountains from your skyline picture. I literally just googled Onward desktop background and I found an image I liked and cropped the skyline from it. I actually did 2 of them and then taped them together, and I'm just wrapping it around the cake, and you'll find that 2 sheets of A4 is enough to go all the way around. Pin that into place and then use your airbrush with the dark blue again to airbrush downwards, picking up all of the details. Remove the paper and again set that aside to dry slightly before tearing just a rough uneven shape like this, to then do another layer of mountains in front of the first. Again set that aside to dry. Moving on to the base, I'm just rolling out some sugar paste to about 3 mil thick, and I'm going to use that to cover my board. Smooth that down into place and then use some screwed up tin foil or kitchen foil to impress some texture. Be sure to use different parts of the tin foil so it doesn't end up looking too uniform, and pay particular attention to the edges. Use a sharp kitchen knife to trim around the edge of the board, and if you find it's pulling or tearing, you can clean the blade off on a clean piece of kitchen roll or a kitchen towel like I'm using. I tend to use a downward sawing motion to avoid pulling the sugar paste away. Switch back to your airbrush, this time using black airbrush colour, and just work your way across the edges of the cake, picking up that texture. Moving on to Ian himself, I'm starting by rolling out some modelling paste coloured with navy blue colouring, and I'm rolling this quite thin because Ian's limbs are all very thin. You'll see that I'm using an image of Ian himself as a reference there to make sure that I get the proportions right. And I'm just adding some extra definition at the knees before placing it onto a polystyrene dummy. Do be careful when doing this because it could rip if you bend it too quickly. With a modelling tool, add some texture in at the knees to make it look a little bit more realistic, and then again use your reference image just to check you're happy with the dimensions. I decided to trim mine off a little bit more. Soften those edges. And then it's time for his bottom. To do this, I just added another ball of paste covered navy blue and packed it on top. I'm not too concerned about blending any seams because they'll be hidden by his shirt, and then I just poked a skewer down through the top into the polystyrene dummy to hold him in place. For the flesh tone, I used some pale blue gel colour mixed with a little bit of grey, and I'm just rolling kind of a large oval shape to form his torso, again using that reference image just to make sure it's the right size. Trim a flat bottom and then push that down onto the skewer, gluing it in place with some water. Again, I'm just going to smooth that down, but I'm not too concerned about a seam because it will be hidden by the shirt. You just don't want any obvious lumps or bumps. Take another piece of the pale blue paste and just wrap that around the top for the neck. And this time I am going to spend some time smoothing it in because some of this will be visible through the shirt collar. Speaking of the shirt, I mixed some burgundy and some red gel colours into some more modelling paste, and I'm rolling this out nice and thin. Regularly check it against your model to check the dimensions are correct, and then cut a flat edge and 2 flat sides. I'm checking it against my model again, and actually it was still slightly too big, so I'm going to trim off a little bit more. Wrap it around the model and start to kind of push it into the places that it will sit, so around the legs, down the back and onto the shoulders. And then take it off and just use a craft knife or a scalpel just to kind of make it more shirt shaped. So I'm adding a little kind of flap at the back and lifting it up slightly at the sides. Wrap it back around the body, and this time you want to stick it into place using some water. I really do spend my time here to make sure it sits nicely, and in fact I do trim off a little bit more, as you'll see in just a moment, where my manhandling had stretched it a bit more. Smooth everything down and then pinch the paste together at the shoulders before once again using a scalpel even to trim off any excess. This is quite a blunt scalpel, which is why I'm able to cut towards my skin, but obviously you don't really want to be doing this. Do as I say and not as I do. I spent some time neatening up the neck as well because we don't want any tear marks, and then I just got some scissors to trim off any further excess before using the edge of one of my modelling tools just to smooth those seams. Use a modelling tool to add in some more kind of creases and folds to make your shirt look a little bit more realistic, and if you want to use your reference image to help you decide where to put these, that's fine. Brush some more water around the neck, and to add the collar I just rolled out a small rectangle of paste and folded it over before sticking it on and then moving it into place with a modelling tool. For the hands, I started with a teardrop shape before pushing it flat and rolling in a wrist, and then cut out a triangle to form the thumb. Round the edges of this and the side of that first finger that you've created before taking your scalpel and making 3 more cuts to form the 4 fingers. Really do spend some time here rounding those off to make sure that they look natural, otherwise they can look a little bit blocky. If you find it easier to do this with a modelling tool, of course that's fine as well. I used a piping tip to add in the fingernail marks, first one way and then the other, and then the thumb as well, but remember to do that slightly sideways. And then I got a small ball tool just to flatten off where the knuckles would be before adding in the crease marks using a scalpel again. Smooth over them with your fingers just to make sure they don't look too sharp, and then realise quickly that you forgot the thumb and do that as well. Check your hands are roughly the same size, and then you can add them to the model. To make his arms, again I'm rolling out some really thin sausages of paste, and you'll see I'm checking them against each other to make sure they are roughly the same thickness. You can use your reference image to check against regularly. And again, make sure you smooth off any cut edges so they don't look too obvious. Trim off the top corner of each of the arms, and again smooth. And then use your modelling tool to add some definition at the elbow. Brush it with a little water at the top and the bottom, and then stick it into place on the side of the shoulder and on the hand. Repeat for the other arm, and then just check you are happy with the placement. For his pocket, I rolled out another small rectangle and then just hand cut a pocket shape smoothing off the cut edges with my fingers, and adding in some stitch marks with my modelling tool before attaching it in place. You can also use your modelling tool to add cuffs to the sleeves, although this probably would have been easier to do before I put them on the model in hindsight. To add the plaid pattern to the shirt, I'm using navy blue powder colour mixed with some dipping solution, although any high content alcohol will work. You want to keep this quite pale at first and really take your time painting in these horizontal and vertical stripes. In fact, this took an awfully long time. If you decide you'd rather skip this bit, just leave the shirt red. I'm sure no one would notice. Once you've done that, switch to a thinner brush, make your navy blue paint thicker, and then paint a thin stripe through the middle of each of the thick ones, both horizontally and vertically, making sure you do the arms and the collar as well. Going back to that flesh tone now, we're going to be making the head, and this starts off as kind of an oval, but thinner at the top than the bottom. Push your fingers in towards each other to form the bridge of the nose, and then this is quite tricky, but he's got a rather unusually shaped nose, so I really spent some time here looking at my reference image and trying to form that with my fingers. It's important that you smooth out any obvious finger marks, so do really take your time here and use your modelling tools to help you kind of define the nose and again smooth out any obvious finger marks. I wish I could make it easier to explain how I did this, but I really did just spend a lot of time looking at that reference image. Thin down the chin a little bit, as his face does end quite thinly. And then gently draw in the rough shape of the mouth before spending some time really finessing this with your modelling tools. Now Ian does have a very expressive face, so you don't have to just go with a basic smile. Why not use your modelling tools to experiment with different expressions? I'm now using a soft silicone tip modelling tool to just push the paste up towards the mouth slightly to form the rough shape of a lip, before switching to a larger ball tool, which I've checked against my template image, to push in some eye sockets. Roll 2 small balls of white paste and gently plop those into place, pushing them down flat. And then brush around the outside of the eyes with a little water. Roll a very thin sausage of black paste and place that around the top of the eye to form his eyelashes, and then take your time pushing this into place with your modelling tools. You can trim off any excess using your scalpel. Then take a small amount of brown paste, roll a tiny little ball and push that into place to form his iris. And repeat for the other side. Switching back to the black, we're going to roll 2 even smaller balls and push them into place on top of the brown. And then do it one more time with some white to add some highlights or catch lights to his eyes. With the darker blue paste, made by using my pale blue and navy mixed together, I rolled a carrot shape, squared off the edge, and added that above his eye for his eyebrow. Again, repeat that on the other side as well. For the ears, we're going to start with a large teardrop, and then using a modelling tool, I'm going to push down through the centre, rolling it to open it out slightly, and then refining this by hand. Push it against the side of the head until you're happy with the shape, and then attach this using a little water. And again, repeat it on the other side. I spent some time with the modelling tool, again just refining these until I was happy with them. Using another skewer, we're going to make a guide hole towards the back of the rear of the head, and then use that skewer to work out how much you need to trim off from your first skewer. Trim down the neck until it's the size that you are happy with, and then brush it with a little bit of water before sliding the head down into place. To make the shoes, I started with an oval of green which I chopped in half, rounding off any sharp edges or cut marks, and then I rolled out a small piece of white modelling paste before cutting out a circle with a small circle cutter. A piping tip would work just as well. Cut this in half, and then using a small amount of water, attach these semicircles to the front of each shoe. Press them down into place and trim off any excess. Roll out 2 very thin flat strips of white and wrap them right around the shoe, meeting at the back and trimming off any overlap. Finally, roll very small, very thin sausages of white modelling paste, trimming them at each end, and then attach these to the top of the shoes using water to make the laces. These can then be attached to the bottom of Ian's legs, but they will need supporting until they are completely dry, so you just push some cocktail sticks into your polystyrene dummy. Add some white to the leftover paste that you used to make his jeans, and then roll a thin sausage before flattening it down and trimming it to form his turn-ups. Brush them with some water and wrap them around the bottom of his legs, joining at the back, trying to be as gentle as you can so you don't break a leg. Finally, before we set him aside to dry, I'm just going to use some pale pink powder colour to dust the inside of his ears, his cheeks and the tip of his nose. Ideally you want to set your model aside to dry completely before adding the hair, and then to do that I started by wrapping a sausage of blue paste around the back of his head, again attaching it with a little water. Spend some time kind of pushing this into the shape that you're happy with before using a modelling tool to add in texture, pulling it down in front of his ears to form his sideburns. You'll see later on that I did actually add some extra paste to his sideburns as I wanted them to be a little bit more prominent. One of the good things about Ian is that he does have really untidy hair, so you don't have to be too neat with this texture at all. Brush the top of the head with some more water and then push on another flattened ball of paste. Use your modelling tool to add the texture starting at the front and then working your way backwards towards the crown, blending the top and sides slightly together. Brush the front of his hair with some water, and here comes the fun part. Roll lots of little sausages with sharp edges and attach them to the front of his head, allowing them to fall rather haphazardly across the back of his head. I left some sticking up, some flattened down, and then I went in with my modelling tool just to add a little bit more texture to those as well. Finally, make some buttons by rolling some small flattened discs of white paste, attaching them to the front of his shirt, pushing in some small holes with a scribing tool. And finally, it's time to add him to the cake. You'll notice he pulled off the skewer when I removed him from the polystyrene, so I actually took his head off, put a new skewer down through the middle of his body, and then reattached the head with a little bit more water. To add the stars to the night sky, I just used a white edible pen, and then finally to add the logo, I cheated and used an edible image. If you don't have one of these, then I know that Tracy of the Little Cherry Cake Company has a few tutorials where she shows you how you can create a similar effect using modelling paste. But what can I say? I decided I'd done enough work on this one. Steam the cake using a cake steamer, and then put your letters into place. Again, spend some time looking at a printed logo just to check that you're happy with your placement of these. The joy of doing this with a cake steamer rather than a paintbrush means that you're not going to damage any of that airbrushing that you spent ages created. But anyway, there you go guys, that's the finished cake, all assembled together. I hope you like it. So there you go guys, that's how to create your very own Ian Lightfoot from Onward cake. If you enjoyed that video, do make sure to give it a thumbs up down below. And to see more videos like this from Mr. Baker's Cakes here on YouTube, you can subscribe by hitting that red button down there on the right. Make sure you do swing by and check out all of the other tutorials in our Onward collaboration collection. I'll put all the links down in the description box below. And if you do have a go at making one of them, be sure to tag me on social media. You'll find all my links down there in the description box as well. But anyway, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.